world. He shines in all that's fair. In the rustling grass, I hear him pass. He speaks to me everywhere. That's the song. Of course, this is My Father's World. Malthy Babcock was the writer, and the music was Franklin Shepard. That's a beautiful song. I'm glad we have that in our songbook. At least I'm pretty sure. Annie, do we have that one in our songbook, don't we? Okay. So here's another thought. God's omnipotence is seen in that Satan is subject to him. Go to Job 1 and 12. Job 1 and 12. And the Lord said unto Satan, Behold, all that he hath is in thy power. Only upon himself put not forth thine hand. So Satan went forth from the presence of the Lord. What we see here evidence of God's authority over Satan, don't we? God is the one who has the power in that relationship, not Satan. And I think that's important for us to remember as believers. Satan is the master of the ruse. He's the master of causing us to misinterpret circumstances, okay? To misunderstand. He's the sower of confusion. And he would love for us to operate with the thought that he somehow has power that exceeds that of our Redeemer's. But the fact is he does not. And this verse, Job 1 and 12, is clear evidence of that. God is telling him what his bounds are. God is the one defining Satan's boundaries. And that's important for us to remember in light of things that are going on in the world today. God still sets the boundaries within which Satan can operate. Okay? That hasn't changed. Satan is called the god of this world only because most men follow him. 2 Corinthians 4 and 4. Satan is merely a fallen angel. He is on God's tether. In other words, God's got him on a leash, Brother Pat. I like that. When God is finished with Satan, he will be bound for 1,000 years and then cast into the lake of fire. Romans chapter 20 explains that. Another thought, God's omnipotence is seen in that he restrains man's evil according to his will, and even man's wrath will ultimately result in his praise. Now, this is a quote from Psalm 76 and 10. Surely the wrath of man shall praise thee, the remainder of wrath shalt thou restrain. We see this in Joseph's life. God was in control of the troubles that Joseph endured at the hands of his brothers and by the Egyptian authorities, and everything worked for God's glory. That's Genesis 45 if you want to take a look. We see this in Pharaoh. His rebellion to God merely set the stage for a display of God's almighty power. Go to Romans 9 and 17. I thought we were talking about Pharaoh, but yet we're going to Romans chapter 9. What? What's that say? Romans 9 and 17, For the Scripture saith unto Pharaoh, Even for this same purpose have I raised thee up, that I might show my power in thee, and that my name might be declared throughout all the earth. How about that? First century Christians were not persecuted by the Romans. Do you know that? It changed. It changed under Nero. But first century Christians were not persecuted. And I think it was Tiberius. I get them mixed up. He told the Senate, I want you to add Jesus to the pantheon of Roman gods. And because of political rub, they said, no, we're not going to do that. But he was very, very pro-Christian, even though he himself was not a Christian. And this is under the heading of God controlling the heart of the king. the preaching of the gospel had free reign in the first century, except for some Jewish resistance, okay? But if you were in Rome or what we know today as modern-day Turkey and some other places, there was no law against preaching the gospel. There was no law against gathering together of believers. That changed in the second century, and people began to be persecuted. You know, that's where we hear about the Roman laws prohibiting that. What they did is they believed that people that were believers, they thought they had become unhinged mentally, okay? That was the general thought of Romans who were unbelievers or non-believers towards those that profess Christ. But it was God's mercy that allowed Christianity to grow the way it did in the first century. And the first century would have been 0 to 100 AD, okay? That's what I mean by first century. That's under the heading of God's restraining the wrath. That verse 76:10, the remainder of wrath shalt thou restrain. Of course, that changed with time. And we know about the church's persecution under the hands of the Roman Caesars. All right, so we're about out of time. I think we're going to have to call it there. Ken, you got to help me remember 47. I'm gonna make a mark on my little piece of paper. Actually, it's not even on my. Okay, so we'll just have to